Before we talk about Wanderstop, I think some context is important here. This game's development team seems to be full of talented people, but overall this has been billed as the next game from Davey Wreden, the creator of the Stanley Parable. With that in mind, I think for some people, there was a degree of hesitation between, "Why is this what you're making?" and "This is really weird, but I trust you." Personally, I found myself towards the back end of that scale. Stanley Parable and The Beginner's Guide are such experimental games that something cozy seemed like a major curveball, even if it was always apparent that aspect wouldn't be played completely straight. Still, after being graciously allowed to play a short preview, seriously, thank you Ivy Road, this is so cool, any remaining concerns have disappeared. Because while the environment and music of Wanderstop are certainly calming, you are not playing as a cozy character, which is what makes it compelling. Alta is basically an action game protagonist who has found herself in Stardew Valley, except even Stardew Valley would have had a cave to fight in. Her animations are quick and determined. She has a Witcher sense, and instinctively uses a broom like a sword. Honestly, I was surprised that she actually used the steps when going down ladders, instead of just sliding down, because that's what video game characters do for some reason. You might be wondering just why is Alta at Wanderstop in the first place? Well, she lost a tournament after 3 years of going undefeated, decided to train even harder, and collapsed in a forest. Multiple times. She is an incredibly impatient person who wants to be the best, yet is so worn down by constantly pushing herself and battling that she quite literally can't pick up her sword anymore. I'm kind of focusing on the comedy of the situation, but the intro makes it abundantly clear how genuinely serious and unhealthy this is for Alta. At the same time, the game balances its tone, and managed to also be very comedic, and perhaps even cozy. From what I played, wandering certainly seems to be a big aspect of gameplay. Not in the sense that you're exploring a big world, rather, you're free to do whatever you please. Growing plants, gathering tea leaves, trimming weeds, and cleaning dirt are all crucial parts of gameplay. Each task is extremely simple, but they combine together to create the bigger, more complex game loop of brewing tea for customers. Planting seeds in particular has the neat idea of requiring you to lay them out in a specific pattern. What's coolest about this meandering style of gameplay, though, is how it enables characters to walk up to you. Regularly, customers will approach to talk and eventually ask for tea, regardless of where you are or what you're doing. In so many games, I could see something like this being annoying, but since everything is so low stakes anyway, it's actually exciting to get interrupted. It also creates this cool effect where you'll be hyper-focused on your current task, turn your camera up, and suddenly some random guy is in your face. Though, what truly makes these interruptions enjoyable is the quality of the dialogue. As I alluded to earlier, Wanderstop is very witty and has a lot of good bits. Boro tells an incredibly long, completely improvised joke where the punchline does not relate to any of the setup. Meanwhile, Gerald wakes up his kid once an hour, every hour, just to take a photo. By the way, I looked it up, sleep deprivation's a war crime. I was genuinely laughing for most of my time while playing. You can absolutely tell this is from the same guy who wrote Stanley Parable. Except here, there's none of the meta-narrative context, which lets a completely different comedic muscle get flexed. The dialogue and narrative seem like they'll be obvious high points. Another thing I appreciated on the gameplay front is how decorative it turned out to be. At first I wasn't expecting much customization, but Wanderstop continually throws little trinkets at you to place around the shop. Crops eventually run out of seeds and fruit, but you don't necessarily have to discard the plants, and can instead keep them around as additional props. Although, I couldn't figure out how to actually put a plant into a pot. Still, it's a nice degree of customization, which I think will help grow the player's attachment to the shop. You can even hang the photo of Gerald committing a war crime, or manually change the station on the jukebox. Which, speaking of the music, I did want to touch on it a little. To put it simply, C418 has gone crazy and cranked out another banger soundtrack. Look out, this stuff is gonna be in video essays everywhere. What's especially cool about the soundtrack though, is how dynamic it is. The different characters have their own themes for when you talk to them, helping to get their personality across even more. When you finish dialogue, it will also peak and end on a vibrant note, before returning to a calm state. Now I don't do music, so I won't be the guy making the video essay on precisely how detailed it is, but it's such a nice touch that makes the game even more engaging. I didn't know where else I'd put this, by the way, so I'm just gonna put it here. If you're wondering about any technical aspects, the build I played seemed to be very stable. I did encounter this weird bug where every time I would stop, Alta would lean back, which I personally hope they keep, as it was mildly amusing. The contrast between the laid-back gameplay and the distress of its characters creates such a compelling mixture of flavors. This isn't a game where the traumatic elements will slowly creep into the story. They are very obvious from the start, and it's more like the coziness is just pushing them to the side for a little, which is apparent even with the side characters. Yes, they are very comedic, but at the same time the customers have their own struggles which mirror Alta's. Gerald is desperate for his son's approval, leading him to be completely overbearing. Meanwhile, the demon hunter is clearly nervous about providing his services, despite the fact he's less a demon hunter and more a general community assistant thing, which might play a role in his nerves. Even though these problems are played for laughs at first, the point is they're taking their issues just as seriously as Alta is taking her own, perhaps to highlight how ridiculous Alta's attitude also is. At the same time, I'm not entirely convinced the narrative will be played so straight. The game could just be Alta learning that tea and menial tasks won't help her get over mental exhaustion, and that could still be really excellent. Simultaneously, I can't help but think there is a small chance that she will just murder someone before the ending. There's enough uncertainty that I can't get a read on exactly where the storyline will go, although it's clear that at some point something is going to have to give. Because even though Alta has gone too far in her quest to be a fighter, I'm not convinced brewing tea is for her either.